The first time I ever heard this story was from a girl who told me it happened to her sister. The second time I heard it was from a friend of a friend, and then the third time it was from someone else. But this story is different because I actually experienced it myself. It's about an intruder in your house that's been hiding in your attic. But not just any kind of intruder. It's the same person every single time. He's always watching us from above. It's nighttime and I can hear the scratching. I can hear him walking around up there. And now I know what he wants. He always wants the same thing. And the first time this happened, it was years ago. My brother and I were sharing a room. We were probably 10 or 12 at the time. And one night we woke up to what sounded like footsteps in our attic. Now, our house didn't have an attic. So my dad built us one in the room directly above ours. And he built it out of wood. And it had these wooden beams that went across the ceiling. But over time, the wood expanded and contracted with humidity changes, and it made a lot of noise. But these sounds weren't those sounds. They were heavy footsteps. Someone was walking around up there. And being kids, we started making up stories about what could be up there. Then my brother and I started hearing the footsteps more and more frequently. And my mom said, "Hey, if you guys are scared, we can get rid of the attic." So she came up with a plan. She wanted to go into the attic while we were home so that she could remove some of the wooden beams and make it safer for us to sleep. But when she opened the hatch, it was completely empty. There was nothing up there. And as the weeks went on, we stopped hearing the footsteps and we all pretty much forgot about it. Until about 2 years later, when I was homesick from school. I was laying in bed listening to the rain outside when I started hearing it again. Heavy footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic above my head. I tried to tell myself it was the rain making the sounds, but it wasn't. I got up and walked to the attic door and I started listening. And I knew exactly what sound I was hearing. It was the same exact sound I heard when I was in elementary school. So I ran and got my mom. And when I told her what I heard, she just smiled and said, "Yeah, let's check it out." She went to the attic door, opened it up, and started looking around. And there was nothing there. And a few months after that, I heard the footsteps again. And every time I heard them after that, I would run and tell my mom. And every time she would come up and say, "There's nothing here." And then we would all go back downstairs. And it wasn't until years later that I learned how to use a screwdriver. So I decided to go into the attic myself and see what was up there, because all these noises were driving me crazy. I went into the attic, grabbed a flashlight, and started looking around. And all I found was a vent. Now, our attic was extremely hot, and the vents were extremely dusty. So I assumed that the air coming through the vent must have been carrying the dust and making it seem like someone was walking around up there. I went back downstairs and I explained that to my mom, and she agreed with me. But fast forward a few years later, and I moved out of my parents' house, and I started living with my girlfriend. And one night we were home alone, and I could hear footsteps in the attic above my head. Now, my girlfriend couldn't hear them, but I could, and it was driving me crazy. And I was sure that it was the same sound I used to hear in my childhood home. So I told my girlfriend, "I'm gonna go check it out." And she said, "You go do that, and I'll stay down here." So I went into the attic, and I shined my light around, and all I found was a vent, which looked identical to the one in my childhood home. And I started thinking, is it possible that the same thing is happening at both of my houses? I mean, the attic in this house is barely big enough for me to stand in. How could anyone be back there without me knowing about it? Then I started paying attention to the details. First, I noticed that the footsteps would only happen at night when no one else was home. And second, the footsteps would only happen after I finished watching certain YouTube videos about paranormal activity. And when I realized that, I thought, wow, maybe there really is something to this. Maybe the footsteps I've been hearing my entire life are real. Because the way it's always happened, it's been late at night, my girlfriend or my mom would be sleeping and I would be the only one awake. And every time I would hear the footsteps, I would go and investigate and I'd find nothing. And I kept thinking, how could someone be up there? And how could they be moving things around and me not know about it? I mean, my house is not that big. If somebody was back there, I would definitely notice, right? And then it occurred to me that the person in the attic isn't trying to hide from me. He's trying to hide from my mom. You see, when I was a kid, I used to hear the footsteps when my mom was in the house, and then later on when I investigated, I never found anything. And the only time I hear the footsteps now is when I watch paranormal videos. And it's almost like he's trying to tell me something. And it wasn't until recently that I finally figured out what he wants. See? The last time I heard the footsteps was a few months ago. And this time I was home for Christmas, spending the holidays with my family. And it was late at night and I could hear the scratching. I could hear him walking around up there. And now I know what he wants. He wants me to go into the attic. He wants me to investigate. See, for the longest time, I thought the footsteps were my imagination, but I'm starting to think that they're real. And now I'm wondering if my dad knew about this too. When he built us that attic, why did he build it out of wood? That made so much noise. And why did he build it in the first place? I mean, we didn't even use it that much. My dad always liked working in his garage, and he always kept it very clean. Everything was organized. And one time I asked him, "Why do you keep everything so neat?" And he said, "Well, it makes me feel safe." And it occurred to me that he might have been building the attic to hide something from my brother and me. See? My dad passed away 2 years ago, and it was very sudden. He just had a heart attack. But before he died, he sat me and my brother down, and he said, "I need to tell you guys something. There's something I haven't been honest about. Your mother and I aren't really your biological parents." And then he dropped a bomb. "These people right here, they're your real parents." Then he showed us pictures of two people that we had never seen before. And he explained that when we were babies, our biological parents left us on the doorstep of their home, and they asked him to raise us, and he agreed. And then he said, "Your real parents aren't bad people. They just made a mistake. They were very young, and they couldn't take care of you guys. So they asked me to adopt you." But I think there was more to the story. I think there was something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. Something that my dad didn't want us to know. And I think the attic was part of that secret. I mean, why would he put in all that effort to build us an attic only to rip it out and then later put it back in? And I remember him telling us that he installed surveillance cameras in our house. And I thought, well, that's pretty normal nowadays. But now I'm starting to wonder if that was his way of keeping tabs on us, watching us when we didn't know. And then when I moved out, I started hearing the footsteps again. So is it possible that he installed surveillance cameras in both of my houses? Like, how could I know for sure? And if he was watching me all those times when I went up into the attic, why didn't he just tell me? Why didn't he let me keep investigating? And why? Does he still want me to go up there today? Am I missing something? Is there something in that attic that I don't know about? Because every time I hear the footsteps, I go up there and I look around and I find nothing. So I'm starting to think that the footsteps aren't coming from my attic. They're coming from inside my walls. If the footsteps are in my walls, that means there's someone in my house. Someone who's been following me my whole life. And the question is, why? And it's almost like he's watching me, like he's waiting for me to do something. Like the first time I heard the footsteps, I went into the attic and I investigated. The second time, I did the same thing. And then the third time, I called my mom. And each time I took a different action, I reacted differently. And it's almost like he's trying to communicate with me through these footsteps. And I'm starting to think that he might be stuck in my house. And whatever he wants me to do, I need to do it. And if I don't, then he'll keep trying to get my attention. And the scariest part is, I don't know what he wants. I grew up hearing those footsteps, and now that I'm older, I understand that something weird is going on, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what he wants. And honestly, I'm kind of scared to find out. If you have any advice for me, please let me know. Thank you for watching.